please welcome Dr. Bob Lobel.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I met Paul and some of you guys for the very first time at the 2005 retreat at Mohunk. For those of you guys who remember that. And by the way, literally just minutes ago, I get a creepy text, and I'll read it to you. I mean, this is you talk about exerting power and control. Blessings to hugs to all the boys of New Canaan from the gym father. He's here somewhere. How's that possible? So, but in all seriousness, Jim does send his love. So he's still trying to run it. So my intro to NCS. I'm at a medical meeting in Salt Lake City in the winter of 2005, and at the cocktail hour, I'm talking to a guy from Mobile, Alabama, who looks at my name tag. He says, "Albany, I'm flying into Albany in 2 weeks." And, you get talking to someone and you can pretty quickly realize, oh, you've got a spiritual connection. This is a brother in the Lord. And I'm saying, well, if you're coming to Albany, I'd come over to the house. I'd love for you to meet my wife. And he says, no, I can't stop. I'm coming up with 30 guys from Mobile, and we're driving down to New Paltz for this retreat, this men's retreat, and I'm like, and he says, and by the way, you'd probably enjoy coming too. So at that point in my life, I was flying every other weekend, doing courses and lecturing and surgerizing all over the place, and didn't think too much about it. But literally, I get home, that weekend just disintegrated for wherever I was supposed to be, and it was suddenly free. So I talked to my oldest boy, and we hopped in the car and drove down to Mohunk, and literally pull in there. I didn't know anything about NCS at all. Didn't know anybody. Pull in there, get into that room, 400 guys packed into that little place with Paul Baloche leading worship. Paul Baloche, I think, is what he's going by now. He's trying to reinvent himself. That is true. That is true. His kids they use Baloche now, so that's what he's trying to go by. But anyway, pull in there and literally slide into this row, and who is sitting right next to me? Paul and his brother, John, who's an ENT surgeon in Albany. And I just thought this was really very coincidental. But that was my intro to NCS. I'll be honest with you, I've never felt very comfortable in the NCS group because, there's not a whole lot of physicians in the group. It's all wealthy, powerful, Goldman, and these kind of guys who are like uber wealthy. And this is true as well. I have never gone to a retreat or an NCS meeting that I don't feel tiny in compared to all these uber successful, wealthy, with it guys. And here I am, very dysfunctional. I don't
know what NCS meetings you've been to, but
just sharing my reality. just sharing my reality. I used to think that I had it all together as well. And, actually, the conundrum, of course, is professionally my patients need me to have it together, right? None of us want to go, especially to a surgeon who is wallowing in shame and guilt. I mean, we want just an excellent result. And if you're passing through Albany ever on I-90, there's a billboard that reads, and this was suggested by one of my daughters who worked in my office for a summer. She said, "Dad, your billboard needs to read bladders, vaginas, Dr. Lobel." And then another kid, how about that, and then another kid came up with another billboard, "Making America Great Again, one vagina at a time." I'm like, God, this is what you've called me to? This is my life's work? So let me read to you this email, literally, that I just got from a friend. "Hi, I know you're out I was having dinner with a friend. I know you're out with John tonight, but this is a friend who had just lost her husband. But I just wanted to know, what do you do when it all comes crashing down on you, like you're reliving those awful last days all over again? Does that ever happen to you now, still? I'm sorry to ask this, but it's like Niagara Falls here today, and my heart is breaking all over again. Perhaps if you could just pray that the Lord would be really near to me tonight and in the coming weeks, I'd really appreciate it." That's sort of the life, the world that I live in much of the time. I'm grateful. Sometimes I complain that I still work like 100 hours a week, but honestly, it keeps me having a busy practice, keeps me from wallowing in shame, because that world of shame is sort of that's my world most of the time. Most people look at me, think I'm pretty successful, but I rarely have a day that goes by that I don't think of this quote from Charles Spurgeon, where he said, the famous 19th century preacher, "I know nothing about the wonderful experience of freedom from conflict and complete deliverance from every evil tendency. I sometimes get near to God, but at that time I weep the most for my faults and failings." And it's a real paradox, that verse from 2 Corinthians 12, or those verses where Paul is talking about his thorn in the flesh that we all know. And I'll just read it, because sometimes we think we know it pretty well, but we forget certain things. "In order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me." Blaming it all on the devil, clearly. "3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That's why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, difficulties. For when I'm weak, that's when I'm strong." We suffer in order to get well. We die in order to live. Our life as followers of Jesus is a real paradox. So I'm a Dutch national, was born in The Hague. My dad was 10 to 15 during the war in occupied Holland. My mom spent 4 years in a Japanese concentration camp in Indonesia from the ages of 14 to 18. They never talked about the war years, as much of that generation never did. And so over the years, some of my upbringing has sort of begun to make sense to me. And it's almost amazing to me that they were able to lead functional lives, having to deal with as much of the PTSD as I'm sure they experienced. And my mom, those Japanese camps were actually in many ways worse than the German camps, just less publicized. I grew up in a home completely devoid of religion, God. There's some good things about that. Obviously, there's no religious baggage. But I never heard of Jesus until my parents sent me to a summer camp in northern Alabama. My dad was the malaria specialist at CDC for 40 years, and so I grew up in Atlanta. And they sent me to what they thought was sort of a YMCA camp. Unfortunately for them, these people were really serious about Jesus, and I had a Jesus moment there. I actually had dinner with the guy who led me to Christ 46 years ago, my counselor. I had dinner with him literally 2 months ago in Chattanooga. I mean, it was sort of shocking to me thinking back on all of this. And then my life took a completely different trajectory. And I thought, but you know, deep inside, I thought really it was sort of all about me. You know, when you go to an Ivy League school, a lot of it is, I mean, you're competing with your classmates and sort of whatnot. But my goal when I was at Dartmouth, actually, I was only there because my parents wanted me to go there. And so I was going to lead a church planting team out. And we were planting churches on college campuses around New England, and got married halfway through college, started having kids. First bump on the road, our second son died of SIDS. And I was totally unprepared for that kind of trauma. I mean, I'm like, what the heck has just happened, you know? I mean, I was so full of faith, believe it or not, that one of my friends in the church was a pathologist at Dartmouth Hitchcock, and so we went down into the morgue that night and pulled my little son's body out, brought the elders of the church in, laid hands on his body, prayed for him to be healed. You know, we thought, hey, you know, we're just doing what God's telling us to. It's all going to be for His glory. It's going to work out great. You know, he didn't miraculously come back to life. And my wife and I had a really rough time for about a year. She'd be doing okay. I'd be in depression, vice versa. Delayed medical school. In that time, I sort of got this call to go into medicine, which I took sort of as an insult from God because, you know, I'm not good enough to be a pastor. I have to go in and be a doctor. I didn't really see them as reconcilable, but at least I thought, well, I'll be medical missionary. So go to med school at Oral Roberts. The Praying Hands, where's the hawk? Oh, there you are. The Praying Hands, merging prayer and medicine. That's what it's about. So, and so I thought, well, we'll go be medical missionaries. And we were in Guatemala for 6 months. And that, my wife actually was my assistant in the operating room. That was pretty cool in a lot of ways, but that ultimately didn't work out. So then it seemed like my trajectory was going to be as an academic superstar. So urogynecology 30 years ago was a very embryonic specialty, and there were 5 training programs, and I was internationally known, traveling all over the world. But as you know, in order to be at that level, you have to be out there waving your hands so that people remember that you're around, because there are other people who will take your place if you don't show up. And so I'm on this trajectory. I have my last year in Chicago, Christmas Eve, 1995, emblazoned in my memory. My wife and I had always had this argument about Christmas, where she was such a giver. She would be pulling presents out of every nook and cranny that she had been collecting like the whole entire year, and they'd all come out on Christmas Eve after the kids were in bed. And I'm like, you're going to wreck our kids by commercializing this. It's too much. And this night, for whatever reason, I was just being so obnoxious. We were living with our 5 kids and in this little 1,200 square foot house up in Evanston. And she's pulling all this stuff out, and I'm just following her around from room to room, being obnoxious and mean. And she finally turns to me and she says, with tears in her eyes, she's like, why do you feel like you have to fix me? Why can't you just love me for who I am? And then she walked out into a snowstorm and didn't come back. So after about an hour, I hop in the car, go driving up and down the streets. I finally find her. I'm groveling in the snow, like, honey, please, it's Christmas Eve. I didn't mean it. Come home, please. I'll be better. And then she finally did, happily, but years later, so fast forward, we get to Albany. In the midst of this academic stuff, she comes to me at one point and she says, honey, I know that you really think that you're doing what God wants you to, but you're never home. Your kids are growing up without you, and it might be surprising to you, but I still actually like being with you. It did come as a surprise. The sex was always very good, though, I will say that. And she said, I just want you to reconsider your priorities. So I thought about it, and in a very short period of time, I actually cut out about 75% of my travel, kissed most of my academic life goodbye, which even now, when I go to my professional meetings, it's sort of hard, because as Chip knows, in this world, medicine, academic medicine is a lot of politics. And so there's a lot of, in order to get ahead, you got to lie, cheat, and steal. And I just couldn't do that kind of stuff. So, in fact, my medical school sued me when I resigned and went into practice locally. And that dragged on for a long period of time. But she said, but I was home more, for sure, which was, I don't know if it was good for her, because a lot of other unresolved stuff sort of came out. And then, actually, at the NCS retreat, 2007 Hershey, I'm listening to Jack Deere give a talk about, remember that tree of shame and wretchedness. And his wife had gone to this place out in Wickenburg, Arizona, called the Meadows, for therapy. Cindy and I ended up going out there, and it was just remarkable, as they're talking about family of origin trauma, this root of shame. And I'm trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, I'm a Christian. How can I be dealing with this stuff? Why, so suddenly Romans 7 becomes like my life verse. Why do I do the things I don't want to do? And why don't I do the things I want to do? And I'm still wrestling with all that. And then, but it was like scales coming down from my eyes, thanks to the Meadows, Brene Brown, all this kind of stuff. So a year later, Cindy wakes me up in the middle of the night on a Sunday night. I had surgery at 7:30. And remember, she's a nurse, very sturdy, hardy person, having to live with me all these years, and with pain under her right rib cage. So I'm like, she's 50, female, fat, hallmarks of an acute gallbladder attack. So we trundle off to the emergency room, and when a nurse says, this pain is so bad, I got to go to the ER, that's bad, because we learn in medicine you never, ever go to the emergency room, especially if your life depends on it. You stay away from all those kind of places. So we go into the emergency room, and the ultrasound tech puts the ultrasound on that hot gallbladder, and you talk about life changing instantaneously. It changed for me right there, because I'm looking at that ultrasound image and I'm suddenly realizing this is not her gallbladder. I mean, her liver was unrecognizable because it had been it was 3 times normal size, and it had been completely replaced by tumor, by cancer. There was nothing recognizable there. And it's amazing that she was, two nights before we'd been at a fundraiser for dinner, dancing, and stuff. And so this came out of nowhere, and 2 months later, she's dead. I mean, the most horrifying time in my life. But I'm here to say healing does come to a large extent. Interestingly enough, another NCS twist on all this. This happened, she died days before the retreat, which at that time was at the Homestead, that year that Paul and Graham Kendrick were co-leading worship. We had the funeral Thursday morning, and we're sitting around at the house. There were all the out-of-town people around, and thinking, well, why don't we just hop in the cars and drive down to the Homestead and go to the retreat. And I spent that entire retreat crying, basically. And nobody really knew other than my close guys what had happened. But I spent that whole retreat just sort of sobbing most of the time. 2 years later, I started thinking, my wife had told me, she said, you must remarry. You're not going to do well by yourself. Thanks, hon. And it took me about 2 years to realize, yeah, she's right. So I went through a couple of courtships where I fell in love with these amazing Manhattan girls. I was not looking for a trophy wife at this point because I had made my contribution, so I wasn't looking for a 30-year-old. But both of these women very unceremoniously dumped me, which actually in some ways was worse than my wife dying, because, I mean, that was just flat out rejection. And happily, thanks to BJ and his wife, they introduced me to my now wife, Sharon, who some of you have met, longtime Campus Crusade missionary. And she agreed to move up to Albany, and she's been a great grandmother to my grandkids. But you know, there's a lot of pain, and I gotta say, almost every day I deal with a lot of emotional pain that comes from that family of origin trauma of never quite meeting my dad's expectations. It took me a long time to sort of work through. I'm still working through that, and that's where groups like this, you know, I've come to sort of think about shame as my chronic illness. You know, high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, heart disease. These aren't things you're ever going to be cured of. You take your medicine, it keeps it under control. I don't like thinking of NCS as being a theology place, but you know, I really have, the healthiest thing for me is to think of shame as my chronic illness, that as long as I recognize it, I take my daily shame medication in the various forms that comes, I can keep it under control, I can manage it, I don't have to take it out. I used to think, you know, I'd be in a meeting like this, all holy and spiritual and stuff, and literally Friday morning, I'd be in my Bible study group. We'd have an amazing talk about theology and scripture. I'd walk across the hall into my office. I could have my office manager in tears within 60 seconds just because I was being mean to her or passive aggressive or whatever. How is that possible? How can you just have that sort of Jekyll Hyde sort of thing? So nowadays, I just take my daily shame medication in its various forms. I recognize it when that gremlin of shame starts speaking into my ear. You know, you guys, I assume, all know sort of that difference. Guilt is a healthy emotion. You do something wrong, it's good to feel guilty about it. Only psychopaths don't feel guilt. Shame is more that demon, gremlin, whispering into your, it's not just that you did something wrong, it's that you are wrong. That's why your dad never wanted to spend time with you, because he saw how defective you were. Or that's why, you know, these people, that's why your wife treats you like this, because she sees just how defective you are. So at this stage of my life, I'm still happy to be engaged as a busy practitioner, but most of my time I'm just trying to be make a difference in my little world in Smallbany, New York. So I was disappointed when Sharon liked Albany, because I told her, if you hate Albany, I'll move down to Manhattan and get a job at one of the medical schools down there. But unfortunately, she likes Albany. She likes having a home and grass and fields and stuff and a car. So I'll just finish by, I've been reading this book by Richard Rohr called Breathing Underwater, and several things he makes and Richard, by the way, he's like on death's door for those of you who know of him. So he's coming close to the end of his time on earth. But he writes here, until you bottom out and come to the limits of your own fuel supply, there's no reason for you to switch to a higher octane of fuel. And even then, we tend to just, we think sometimes, I don't know why I thought this, but I thought, I come to Jesus, get rid of all my sin, confess all my sin. I'm a new creation in Christ. It's all going to be great from here on out. But I spend most of my time sort of sitting, being a bottom feeder more than anything else. But happily, I get to do that with other people. And that to me is a lot of the power of NCS in terms of a lot of bottom feeding, but fellowship, laughter, and there's a lot of joy in that all at the same time. Thanks very much.